Okay. Hi, everybody. My name's Emily Flanagan from Carson Power. How would you like to run sort of this meeting? Obviously, I think I shared a presentation. Does anyone want to share their screen? I could share my screen, or I've never done actually a virtual planning board. This is my first sort of virtual meeting. So if you have sort of protocol on how to do this, I'll follow your lead.
I think Michael's just having some technical difficulties down there. So, but I gave you the authority to share. So if you want to share your screen, you're allowed to do that. I think we're just waiting for Michael to get his stuff up and going. Looks like he's having a couple issues.
Sounds good. So just to, I guess, is everyone here town board, planning board, a mix of both? Because I know this is a very informal sort of info session, so I wasn't too sure who in the audience do we have.
Hi, I'm Drew Weaver. I'm the town code enforcement officer.
Got it. Okay.
I'm Sarah Jones. I'm on the town board.
Got it.
And a liaison to the planning board.
Thanks, Sarah. Nice to meet you.
I'm Don Bartles. I'm on the town board.
Got it. Nice to meet you, Don.
I'm Trisha, and I'm the Planning and Zoning Board Secretary.
Gotcha. Which I feel we've exchanged
Yes.
a couple.
Yes, definitely.
I'm Rory. I'm a zoning review committee member here, former town board member.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. Nice to meet you more.
You too.
Can anyone hear me now, or still no?
I can hear you
Yeah,
fine.
we can hear you, Mike.
Yes.
All right. I don't know what was wrong with my other headset. Sorry. It said it was connected, but no one could hear me. I'm coming through okay?
Coming through fine.
Great. I'm sorry. So go ahead with the intro. I'm the planning board chairperson, so might as well introduce myself. Go ahead, whoever else was introducing themselves.
We just rounded it out. Rich was just saying hello, but I think you're the last, Mike.
Okay. Sorry about that. All right. So, yes, welcome everyone. Thanks for meeting tonight, and sorry for the change up, but I think with the weather and everything, it was for the best. I think we'll start off with Emily with her presentation, just to review what I talked about in the email. A couple of years ago, we had a solar review committee that looked at the laws around that different communities had, because we have nothing in our code regarding solar power installations. We ended up, the town board instituted a modified unified solar permit for rooftop installations for businesses and residences for use on their location by them. It excluded, and at the time there's a moratorium against anything beyond that, such as ground-based installations, any sort of community solar or neighborhood solar or commercial power generation. And so we're meeting here tonight with Emily from Carson Power, who's going to just so actually back that up. So we came up with recommendations for those other options. They never got put into a statute by the town board. COVID hit, everything got delayed. So now I guess based on the recommendations last year by the zoning review committee to move ahead with the recommendations of the solar committee, the town board is looking to hopefully go ahead with that. That being said, I thought it was a good opportunity once Emily contacted us regarding to find out what our laws were in our community, etc. And I thought it'd be a good opportunity for us to hear what one of these installations look like and what, how they view things from that side of the equation. And so there we are. So Emily, you got to take it away from here. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael. Great intro. I love it. No, it's good. Yeah, I think just to kind of piggyback off what Michael said, I think we ended up going actually to the town hall and got a draft of what's currently being reviewed right now. And so I think it's a great opportunity to sort of get together. Michael, did you share the presentation to everybody, or do we want to flip through my slides, or I don't know, what's the best way here to do that?
I did not send it around. I think Trisha, well, either way, if you want to, Trisha gave you the option to share your screen, I believe. So you can go ahead and share yours.
Let's do it. Okay, super. Let me. I know I'm supposed to be technically savvy because I build solar power plants, but IT is not my strong suit. So give me a second to make sure I'm sharing this properly. Okay. Does everyone see my screen now?
Yes, we do.
Okay. And you're seeing the right.
Well, now we're seeing your calendar. We saw the presentation. Now we're looking at your calendar.
Don't look at my calendar unless you want to know my personal life. Let me just do this and then, okay. How's this?
Looks good.
Okay, let me get rid of this too. Okay, super. So I thought, just based on conversations that Michael and I had, I thought the presentation, we could keep it quite general in terms of, you know, I don't know, again, like how much people know in the audience around large scale solar in New York. Personally, I've been a developer of renewable energy projects for about 10 years. I've been a solar renewable energy developer in the state of New York for about 6. I've done about 35 or so community solar projects in the state of New York, some close to where the town of Pine Plains is. So I figured I could give you maybe a little bit of an overview to start with in terms of what's large scale solar in New York, what are the different programs, what's the state looking at, what are the benefits to the community, kind of go through a little bit of what we looked at when we started thinking about a project in the town of Pine Plains with respect to the infrastructure, the electrical infrastructure, and then talk a little bit about what the proposed project that we have in mind, and get your feedback and sort of, you know, I know you're discussing the zoning code, so would love to sort of talk about that. And then just what's the development process for folks like us? How do we consider the different steps? How long do these systems take to build, get operational, and all of that? And then we can just do a bit of a Q&A and, you know, see if anyone has questions and take it from there. Does that work?
Yeah, that sounds great. Again, I just want to, oh boy, are you guys hearing me again? You're hearing me, right? Okay. I just wanted, again, I made clear to Emily, just wanted to put it out here on, during the meeting, made clear in the email that this is just informational for the boards and for informing us looking at the zoning law. It's not, you know, no promises or any sort of relation to any application Carson Power eventually would put before the town. Okay, so.
And the information that we put on the proposed project is very minimal, and I really want to keep it in that spirit of very just informational about solar in New York, these projects, and please feel free to ask any questions around this. So just, I guess, to kick it off, I'm not sure if anyone's aware here, but a couple of years ago, the state of New York and the governor's office passed a regulation to convert the state of New York from basically a state that has about 30% of renewable energy today in terms of what it's generating to a state that is going to be generating 70% of renewable energy by 2030 and ultimately get to 100% of renewable energy by 2040. So the governor's office passed all these different bills, and with the passing of these bills came a couple of different programs, and some of them which are considered large scale solar. There's 2 major programs in the state of New York right now. There's the community solar program, and then there's a large scale renewable procurement tier 1 REC program. We're a developer that operates obviously in both, but they're very different projects. And I kind of wanted to just highlight the differences here for everybody. Community solar is a program that's been carved out. The goal of the state is to deploy 10 gigawatt of projects, which is about 2,000 projects that average 5 megawatts. Each one of these systems, which is about 5 megawatts, has a lease area, not panels, just the lease area, because you've got rows between the panels, of about 20 to 25 acres. Those projects interconnect at the 3-phase circuit. So that's the distribution generated poles. That's the ones that look like the telephone poles that go up and down our streets, not the big transmission level poles, right? So that's where those systems interconnect to. Permitting is done at the local AHJ, according to the town code that is passed by the local AHJ. Residents subscribe directly to the solar projects, right? So, and part of the program is that you can get a 10% discount on the cost of the generation that's on your electrical bill with Central Hudson. So that's the community solar program. The transmission level solar program, which is also the large scale renewable REC, which is a renewable energy credit auction, which is called the Tier 1 procurement program of New York. That's an annual solicitation that's run by the state's office as well. It's once a year. The average system sizes are a lot bigger, 100 megawatts. You're talking about, this is actually wrong. It should actually read about 700 or 500 acres. So these are really, really, really big projects. The interconnection on those happens on the massive transmission lines, the big poles that you see sometimes when you're driving down highways or, driving across country in New York. And permitting is done at the Office of Renewable Energy Siting, which is a state's government body. And that's where the projects get passed. Obviously, they're done in local collaboration of the AHJ, but they are cited and passed and permitted through the state's office. Electricity for those, residents don't subscribe to them. The electricity on those projects is sold directly to the transmission lines, and it's basically wholesale electricity pricing. And those projects, the energy gets distributed through the grid, and you'll see it come up on your utility bill, but you're not voluntarily subscribing to the projects. So do you guys have any questions on sort of the two different types of programs when it comes to large scale? Because I'll be focusing from now on most of the presentation on community solar, because that's where the AHJ permitting town code really comes into play. And that's sort of the project too that we're looking at. But I just wanted to take a pause here and take any questions with respect to those two programs.
I have a question regarding the larger project. So you said it has authority having jurisdiction involvement. Like, what is the level of involvement? Do we really have any kind of control over those projects?
You do. I mean, right now, what the Office of Renewable Energy Siting requires developers to do is get a community action program involved. So we do have to have some sort of consent from the local jurisdiction that says, yes, we are okay with these projects. But those projects would not follow what the town code is, right? So because they're just that much bigger. But we would need to prove to the state's board that we have had communication with the AHJ, that you're involved in the process, that you're supportive of the process. But it's just less defined as what the local AHJ permitting, right, which we would have to abide to pretty strictly based on your code. So if you require 200-foot setback, if you require all of that, we have to abide to everything on that code, right? Great. So I'll go to the next slide. So again, just as I said, I'm going to focus the rest of the presentation primarily on community solar, because that's really where I think what we're discussing here with respect to how you're writing your town code and how you're thinking through your town code really is the focus. And it's also the project that we're looking at doing. But in terms of community benefits, for us, there's really, what I see is three benefits. It's benefits obviously for the environment, and I'm sure you've heard greenhouse gas emissions and how much solar can contribute to replacing obviously fossil fuel generation like coal power plants or other kinds of fossil-based power plants. And EPA has tons of different calculators that can simulate what that replacement shows. But the other two big benefits, I think directly to the municipalities, is property taxes, and then obviously residents can access cheaper electricity. So in terms of property taxes, I'm not sure if you've been trained or familiar with the RPTL 487, which is essentially a tax law that was passed by the state of New York, which allows counties, towns, and school districts to essentially opt into an exemption on solar project. Now, that doesn't mean you don't collect any taxes on solar project. What that means is you can predetermine with the developer what solar taxes you're going to be getting under a determined contract for, the duration of the project, and say, okay, well, we're going to just, usually in your jurisdiction, let's call it $5,000 or $6,000 per megawatts, which is the capacity of the solar facility. We would discuss that together and say, okay, well, now we're going to enter into a pilot agreement for, call it 15 years. And there's guaranteed revenues that are coming every single year from the solar facility in the form of property taxes. It's not ag exempt, obviously, so we'd roll that back and we'd pay that back also to the jurisdictions. And then there's a fixed contract for the duration where we would pay the towns. And so obviously it's a huge benefit in terms of tax revenues and just clarity on what's coming in from solar projects. The third benefit, which I mentioned, is reduction in electricity bills. Residents are able to voluntarily subscribe to these projects. And so on some of the projects that I've done actually in the town of Rochester, close by to you guys in Ulster County, you know, we even had like a period where only the town residents were allowed to be first come, first serve to subscribe to the project. So often you'll see in some of these projects, you can subscribe to these projects if you're anywhere in the central Hudson and gas territory, right? And so sometimes we'll permit these projects, and one of the things that we like to do, at least with the municipalities, is work together to say, okay, well, if this project is going to come into the town of Pine Plains, let's make sure that the residents of Pine Plains get the first dibs on the project and be able to subscribe first. So we create sort of a period where we just market it to Pine Plains residents. They're able to first come, first serve on the system. And that allows them to access the reduction in in electricity rates. So those are the three sort of main benefits. I've added a link here. I've shared the presentation, so I think the links work, but NYSERDA, which is the state agency that obviously manages and runs all these programs, has a really, really good guidebook for municipalities. And it has, I'm not sure if you have a copy of it, but if you don't, I highly recommend it. It's a lengthy document. It's about 200 pages, but it really goes through everything that most municipalities have concerns about with respect to noise, smell, visual impact, all of that. And so there's a huge guidebook there. Obviously I can answer any questions you have about it, but I thought I'd put the link in there because it's very well done, and it really explains sort of the RPTL 487 tax law, reduction in electricity bills, and provides a lot more insight that I thought would be good to share. So I'll stop there also if there's any questions on this.
I remember when we were talking about this, we talked about like any sort of future decommissioning or expenses like that or impacts.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you could talk a little bit about that. Like how do they usually set up some sort of escrow or what? Like,
Sure. So most town codes, and what I would recommend you insert in your code, is the obligation for the developer to submit during the planning board process a decommissioning plan, which outlines everything that needs to be done and all of the different costs that are associated to decommissioning some of these systems. And then what we mostly have done and works really well is there's a bond that's usually placed, and we are not able to pull down the building permit before that decommissioning bond is placed. And so usually we would work with the code enforcement officer after we've received conditional approval and we're about to work towards sort of getting that building permit. We would work towards putting the bond in place with the engineer's review of our decommissioning plan with the associated cost to it, and then show proof of the decommissioning bond to the code enforcement officer, and that would allow us to release the building permit. So that's usually a pretty standard clause that you would have in your town code, and that's something that most developers are used to seeing, and we work really well with the code enforcement officers to make sure that that bond is in place. It must be renewed, and the money's there if decommissioning were to happen.
What sort of revenue do you anticipate a municipality being able to earn from a 20 to 22 acre 5 megawatt facility?
Yeah, so it depends. Everything is based on system size, right? So most average is the rates usually, and if you don't have access to it, I'll definitely share all that information. NYSERDA puts a pretty good standard grid of those kinds of revenues based on megawatts. It could be anything between $4,000 to $8,000 per megawatt AC, right? So depending on how big that is. Now, that's the rate that is divided up between the school districts, the towns, and the county. So most times when we discuss property taxes, we'll base it off percentages of the mill rates. So depending on sort of the proportionality that a property tax, breakout would be. But sometimes counties aren't necessarily interested in this, and they actually let a lot of the taxes go straight to the towns and the school districts. So all of that is still very much negotiable. But if let's call it a $5,000 per megawatt AC for a 5 megawatt facility, you're talking about $25,000 a year in taxes for a lease area that's about 20 to 25 acres. Right? That's a real ballpark, right? But that's kind of where you'd end up.
So we were talking about in our recommendations, we were talking about a minimum lot size, or no, rather maximum coverage area of a lot. Maybe you could talk about that, like what you're saying, like a lease area of like 20 acres, like usually is that in what size area? Yeah, but there was some concern from the community and from some of the committee members about I guess visual impact and that sort of thing with the rural community and ways of mitigating that, etc.
Yeah, definitely. So the average size area is 20 to 25 acres. Most town codes, when they refer to lot coverage, they refer to the actual surface of the panels. They don't actually refer to the lease area, right? So that reduces a little bit the impact, and it gives a bit more of a easier way to measure the lot coverage. But that's just what we've seen in most town codes, is that's how they do it. A lot of municipalities will mitigate visual impacts by obviously adding required landscaping, required setbacks, required percentage of lot area based on sort of a maximum area. So I would say on a 20 to 22 acre lease area, most lands that we would look at would be more in the 80 to 100 acre lots, right? So we would really be only taking a smaller portion of it. But I think what's really important, and I guess we'll show you sort of the proposed project that we have in mind, is you definitely have the ability as a municipality, right, to set the setbacks, to set the landscaping. We've had municipalities require us to put slats in the chain link fence to make sure that that's also nice and hidden away behind landscaping. So usually it's evergreen, something that sort of doesn't lose its foliage during the winter. A lot of native species requirements. So you can get quite detailed in terms of like how extensive you want the landscaping plan to be. But I really do think when it comes to lot coverage, having a facility that's 10 to 20 acres doesn't really make that much of a difference in terms of visual impact. What you really want to think about is setbacks, landscaping, and something that you can really hide away from the eye, because a 10 acre area or a 28 acre, honestly, doesn't really matter much, because when you're driving by, that sort of frontage that you'll see will be pretty much the same if it keeps going towards the back of a property, right? So, I guess that's just sort of food for thought in terms of how to consider lot coverages.
Right, but I guess there was some current concern too with like vistas, or obviously we have a lot of natural beauty that attracts people to the area, and drives and hikes and stuff, and that's.
There's definitely a lot of ways to make sure that these systems are hidden, and I would say we've had a lot of different processes where there's a pretty extensive siting, landscaping, visual impact process where we have to really show a lot of different ways to mitigate or to hide away the system.
And just, you said, so like 100 acre site, say, gets like 25 acre lease, and then how much of that is panels? What did you say?
I'd say like maybe half of that, because you're thinking there's about 15 to 12 feet of row between every single panel, right? And the panels sit on a bit of an angle, right? So you're looking at about probably 50% of that is actually covered by panels, maybe even less, because you've got the fence area, you've got obviously the access to go around it to do any kind of maintenance, lawn mowing or anything like that, and then you've got 12 to 15 feet of row spacing between the rows of panels.
And is there any sort of batteries or chemicals or any of that sort of thing that's involved?
For the project that we're proposing, we are not proposing to add storage. There's more and more projects coming right now with storage and battery. That is something that you could specify in the code, storage upon review. But that for us on the project that we're looking at, we're not going to be proposing storage. And maybe for some context too, the 20 to 22 acres is really what we as developers try and hit and really need to hit, because we're going to be taking some pretty big costs in terms of interconnection upgrades to just hook up the system to Central Hudson. And so anything below, call it that footprint, makes these projects kind of economically unfeasible, right? So a good community solar project with a standard interconnection to Central Hudson or National Grid or Con Ed requires sort of that footprint to offset those fixed costs that are associated to interconnecting them to the grid. So that's why most systems end up being around the 5 megawatt, 20 to 22 acre footprint area, if you will.
Yeah. So I know the supervisor at the time talked to someone about the landfill in town. There's a old decommissioned landfill, but one of the issues with that was I don't remember how long. Maybe if one of the members, maybe Don might know. Like there's a run that Central Hudson would have to do to connect it to the 3-phase or whatever is needed.
Yeah.
Like usually, like what is that usually? Like what makes sense? Like is it a mile? Like under how much to pay for something like that?
Yeah, no, Michael, it's the perfect transition to get to the next slide. So let me go to the next slide. So as developers, one of the things that we do, and we start first and foremost before anything, is we do an electrical infrastructure analysis of where we're thinking about putting a system, right? And so when we originally looked at the town of Pine Plains, we looked at the electrical infrastructure and we noticed that there's one substation right now that for community solar purposes, right? Which is the Pulver's Corner substation, which is located here. And essentially these are all the circuits that basically go and are interconnected to the substation, right? This is public information. It's on the hosting capacity map of Central Hudson. So if you want to Google it, it's fairly live and it kind of allows you to understand what's the electrical infrastructure that's out there. For these systems to be able to interconnect, you need a couple of things. So you need the substation to have enough capacity for you to inject more power into it. You need the circuits to have enough capacity to inject power into it, right? And you need to be fairly close to where the circuits don't lose too much of their parameters or their ability to transmit the electricity back to the substation, right? The color coding that you see here essentially signifies what's a good circuit or a bad circuit with respect to whether or not the circuit contains enough ability and capacity for the developer to send it back. So anything that's red here and red there is very difficult for us to say, oh, this is a good point of interconnection for us to send electricity back to the Pine Plains, the Pulver's Corner substation, right? So we would disqualify pretty much every site that's along here. We'd be, you know what, it's going to be too expensive for us to make those upgrades to make these projects work. So we start here and we look at, you know, things like the blue and the green and the yellow here signify that's going to probably, I mean, when you go to the hosting capacity map, and I've included a link here if anyone wants to have fun and go look at the maps, but you can click on that and it really provides you all of the data that's available at that point on the circuit. So that's what we really analyze. And so you can see, I think, so this is the town boundaries, if you will. What we did when we looked at the analysis of the electrical infrastructure, we pulled up the central hosting capacity map. On average, it's usually, you can do something 3 to 4 miles along the circuit, unless the circuit doesn't have the right capacity or is not upgraded sufficiently enough, which the color coding here shows. So when we looked at here, we said, you know what, this circuit here is probably feasible, and this circuit here is probably feasible. Anything here is going to be very, very challenging. And so we started looking at land that was really around here. And as you can see, today, based on the analysis of the infrastructure that we have right now, this is only, in our opinion, the batch of land and available land that you could do a project on. That's pretty much it. So when we did that analysis, and Michael, to your point about interconnection costs, in our opinion today, and obviously, you know, we don't know what Central Hudson is going to do in 5 years and if they're going to build a brand new circuit, but as of today, for us, from a cost perspective, these are the only parcels and sites that would make economic and feasible sense to build a project on.
That's interesting. Very small area.
Yeah. Yeah, and it is mainly because this circuit here, right, is not currently upgraded enough to handle the kind of capacity that you would need to build and inject a community solar project onto, right? So we could go up here, then we get out of the town of Pine Plains, right? But within the town of Pine Plains, you're really looking at quite a small area. Yeah. And again, like I said, Central Hudson may have plans to build a brand new circuit in a couple of years. So this evolves, obviously, and the hosting capacity map is a live tool. I mean, we can go to it if you'd like to just kind of get a sense of what it looks like. So you get to the Central Hudson. These are all the circuits of every single circuit in Central Hudson and all the different substations. So this is the first thing that we look at as developers to say, okay, where can I actually find adequate infrastructure that will be feasible for me to interconnect these systems? And so if we go to, I think I have it in here, the coordinates, the GPS coordinates of the facility. So here you go. So now we go to Pulver's Corner, which is there. So see, if you click it, you've got all the hosting capacity. So it just gives you as a developer all of the right information that you need to look at to consider, okay, like how much, so let's go to, okay, substation level system data. So you have 1 megawatt that's installed. There's a transformer, which has 5 megawatts of MVA capacity, which means that we could potentially interconnect 4 megawatts. It then says there's another transformer at the substation, which has 10 megawatts queued, which is actually our project because we put in an application to request more information, which is part of the interconnection process. And there's that one can handle 17. So there's about 7 megawatts left, right? So this is all the tools that we use to get a sense of where we can actually put these systems. And like I said, you can see the circuits and you do an analysis on the circuits and you understand like, okay, well, as of here, if I were to interconnect a facility here, it says that I can really only do 0.9 megawatts on this point, right? So that means I'd have to upgrade the entire circuit, which starts becoming very costly. So we really look at these maps as our starting point to say, okay, where can we actually go talk to landowners where we could potentially do a system? So yeah, so that's where the it's the starting point for us, and it's probably the most critical point for us, right? To understand where we can actually put these systems.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely just it limits down, at least as you said, currently in the current conditions, it limits down where any of this would ever take place by a lot.
Correct. And so often, you know, what we do as developers too, especially when towns like yourselves are working through your code and working through like the mapping of where these systems are allowed, this is always really good to understand because evidently sometimes we've seen codes pass where you could only do it, for example, systems up here, but that means you can't do any systems because there's not even electrical infrastructure, right? So it's important to coordinate between the grid and obviously, preserving the character of the town as well, but it's quite limiting the interconnection infrastructure, and that's really the first starting point for us. Any questions on this?
I had a somewhat related question. Do you guys work with Scenic Hudson at all? Because they had contacted us about the siting tool that they were developing, and I guess trying to convince us to get to yes more often with our code as opposed to, which might surprise some people, but obviously they're, I guess they have a dual environmental organization, but also about preserving the Hudson Valley, etc.
Yeah. I haven't worked directly with them. I've definitely worked. I've heard of them and I've worked with them. There's a lot of different groups out there that work on these things. I haven't personally worked directly with them. We did though, because I guess I'll show you the project that we're considering. So we ended up, based on sort of this, we ended up analyzing, like I said, these different parcels, and we did reach out to those landowners, And the landowners that came back that were really interested were this parcel, right? And so when we looked at this parcel and we walked it, we're like, well, you know what, this is very interesting, because how about we preserve, the character and give as much setback as possible to these systems. And I think you're probably familiar with Bean River Road here and Route 199. But if you've ever, I don't know if anyone's gone up to this property, but the systems here, if we were to place them, would be literally invisible to any of the roadways, because essentially these farm fields here, we would leave protected. We're actually potentially even going to put them in conservation easement to completely ensure they're protected. But that slope is incredibly steep, and it steeps all the way down to Bean River Road. And same goes with this farm field. So you've got essentially these farm fields that roll up with all of this wooded area. And we thought, well, wouldn't it be great? Then we can just put the system in the middle there, and they would then effectively be completely hidden away from any kind of public. And so I guess that's really how we work with siting. We really see a piece of land and say, okay, well, you know what? Yeah, it's definitely going to cost us more money to build a road all the way to the back. But to preserve the character of the town, to ensure that we're protecting the right areas, let's work together with the town and the landowner to figure out a way to have the systems kind of squeezed in the back so that no one sees them. And I don't know if you've ever walked this, but if you're walking around here, all of the farm here and all of the trees effectively offer enough coverage there to not have anything visible. So I guess, yeah, that's how we think through it. So that's, yeah, we try and also.
Well, that would address directly the concerns that I guess people were talking about,
Right. If we can work with the natural vegetation, that's even better, right? Like if we don't have to just go and plant a row of evergreens, it's even more convenient for everybody. Obviously, not all pieces of land offer the opportunity, but so happens that this one does. And so this is sort of what our proposed idea was, is that the substation is here. So we would, kind of group the interconnection infrastructure upgrades in the same area. So that would minimize also the impact. Build a road through here, which is actually, there's already an existing sort of farm road that goes up here, and then the ability to sort of push the systems all the way to the back so that they're completely invisible if you're driving up and down Bean River and up and down 119. So that was our idea. Yeah. Any questions on these?
Well, yeah, as I said, we're gonna, probably reserve any questions on the specific project, but it's a good example.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think, like I said, most of the projects that we've done, I always think about how can we work collaboratively with the town there's no real win-win for anybody if we were to put the system right here or the systems right here, right? So, yeah, anyways. So I guess in terms of just the development process, I just wanted to give you a little bit of how our process works and sort of what the timelines are around these systems. So site identification, like I said, for the first 1 and 2 months, we do an analysis of the grid. We try and find, like we have here, all the various parcels that we believe today can interconnect properly to the grid. And obviously have enough of a footprint so that we're not using 100 acres of land for solar. We're just figuring out a way to have 20 or 25 so that we can send them all the way to the back and they have feasible interconnection. So for about 1 or 2 months, we do that analysis. We find landowners obviously that are interested, because that's not all landowners are interested. And so once we have our short list, we start talking to them. Right now we're in the negotiations to finalize an option to purchase with those folks. So we don't have full site control yet, which we will require if we appear in front of the planning board, but I thought they're obviously excited, and it was always good to get an information session going. And then we do a little bit more of site discovery, which is essentially, we'll perform things like understanding if we're impacting wetlands, understanding if we're impacting any kind of endangered species, archaeologically sensitive areas, effectively anything that's required for the seeker process Because when we start the planning board process in most towns in New York, one of the first steps is the seeker process, and we have to demonstrate that we've coordinated with all of the agencies in the state of New York, from SHPO, DEC, Army Corps, IPAC, all of them, that we've done all the required site discovery and due diligence from an environmental standpoint. So phase 1 ESA, all of that, that goes into our site discovery. This project doesn't impact wetlands. It has no recognized environmental conditions. We've identified some endangered species, not on the site, but a couple of miles away. So we need to take that into consideration and coordinate that with the agencies if we were to start permitting this process through seeker. But that's essentially what happens for site discovery.
How often do you come across a positive declaration versus negative declarations?
Oh, never.
Never. Okay.
No, I mean, at the point where we're about to present to seeker, if the project has a lot of, environmental issues or other issues, we wouldn't even bother presenting it. We would move on to something that has way less risk. From a permitting standpoint, from a financing standpoint, it becomes very difficult if we can't get something that we know has it's going to have a negative declaration. So I'm sure there are out there, but when we do our site discovery, we kind of ensure that we're going to, we bring sites that most likely will have a neg deck on the seeker.
Okay.
So to that point, once we've done our site discovery, we present our permitting package to the AHJ, and in process, we are running the interconnection study process with the utility. So there's a 4 to 6 month process with Central Hudson where they do a detailed analysis, because obviously there's all of the information that is online, right? And sometimes it's not updated or there's some changes. So we go through a detailed study process to confirm what is happening. And also they provide us then with a fully broken down cost of how much it's going to cost to upgrade the system. And in process, we're usually having conversations with the town. We do seeker, we review, site plan approval, the SWIP, anything that needs to happen, decommissioning, estimates, everything that's got to happen to basically be able to get to a building permit. Once we've got all of that done, we basically go to the investors that we usually work with to finance these systems. So it's about a 1 to 2 month process where they review all the due diligence of everything that we've done from step 1 to step 4. Then we do construction. It's about a 6 to 8 month window, depending on whether or not we're doing trenching in November or trenching in, in the spring when we have to wait. So, but once we get all of that done, installation and everything is about a 6 to 8 month time frame. And then after that, the system is operational for about 20 to 25 years. That's usually the duration of the life of the system. And then after that, we decommission the system. But I don't know where any of us will be in 25 years, but there should be a decommissioning bond and plan that's approved, and that's at the town to get rid of this.
Yeah, I mean, who knows what the technology would be like then either. Are there any plants that are even close to that happening to, or yeah, it's all new stuff.
The program in New York started, let's call it in 2015, 2017.
Mm.
So most projects are in their early days of operation. But you're right, Michael, I think the technology will evolve, and potentially, I could envision developers or operators in 15 years replacing the size of the type of modules, but I don't think uprooting the entire system would make a lot of sense. So I think it's more just the panel technology is the one that's getting a lot of headway, and that's really if I had a crystal ball, that's what I would think, but I don't, so don't hold me to it, but that's where I would see people going.
And the only thing that's substantial in the construction of it is just footings that the poles go in, and poles to bring the electricity out, right? That's the only thing that's there, really, right?
Yeah, pretty much. Yep.
How does your company look to manage the agricultural lands you'll end up possessing here and elsewhere?
So we have to coordinate with ag and markets, and we have to send, so there's a pretty detailed process that we have to follow with respect to ag and markets. And we have to file what we'll be impacting, and then they have to send us back how they view that we should mitigate against any impact to the agricultural land that we may be taking out. So it really depends on what their review is, but we usually coordinate with them and figure out how we should mitigate and what they would require us to do. So.
Well, in the map you presented, it looked like you were only thinking about building on certain portions of that property,
Yes.
Preserving the ag land on the rest of it.
Yes.
I don't know if that's what you were speaking to regarding ag and markets mitigating impacts or not. But you expect that what I see there is the agricultural lands to still be used agriculturally and to be productive?
We'd like to. I mean, we have no intent of stopping that if the farmer still wants to farm and there's the ability for them to keep doing it. We have no reason to keep these fields idle. That's not not really in our interest.
Rory, I got to think that, these sort of projects would help farmers, remain in business, right? With this additional income from the leases and stuff, right? No?
I guess I wasn't sure if it was a lease or I thought Emily was talking about the purchasing of these properties, but maybe it is just a 25-year lease that you're talking about.
So I guess I'll answer both questions because in this specific instance, the landowners are looking to sell, so we would be purchasing. Obviously, we can't. We love to lease, we love to purchase. It really also is at the discretion of what the landowner would prefer. But yes, Michael, to your point, I'd say most of the projects I've worked with in the state of New York are from farmers that currently farm the land. And it's an incredible hedging mechanism for them to be able to have both a farming activity and stable income from the solar to be able to continue farming and honestly farming their best parcels. A lot of times you'll have a farmer with, 150 acre piece of land and you can't farm 150, you can probably farm 80 really well. And then there's always some area that they're really struggling with. And we're able to sort of squeeze the system where that farmer is experiencing those issues. And that allows that farmer to be able to have, on your bad years, you have at least the solar income that's coming in every single year. And that's pretty stable. But in this instance, there is a farming contract on this property, which again, if the farmer still wants to farm these areas, we don't really see why it would an issue to us because, it's not really impacting the area that we're using.
You couldn't speak for yourself too, but I'd be also curious to know about the industry writ large, but is it typical for an energy company to purchase the property or are the leases much more common?
It's really interesting, Rory. So I've been doing this now for 6 years in the state of New York. And when I started, everything was leases. There was no one looking to sell and everyone was really interested in optional leases. I don't know if it's just because of sort of what's going on in the market right now and interest rates or whatnot, but people are getting really great money, I think, for selling their properties. And so we're just seeing a lot more of that in the last 6 to 8 months. I don't know if it's typical or if it's here to stay, but I would say it's a very interesting thing that in the last 8 months, I've seen a little bit of a shift from, I'd say, exclusively lease agreements to now landowners being like, no, you know what? I'm just going to sell. So, yeah.
That's probably a market effect, with the land prices all being through the roof right now.
I really think so. I think we're just in that dynamic today, just across the country, honestly. But I would say, yeah, when I started off 6 years ago, options to purchase were very rare, very rare. Yeah.
I have concerns over farmland that doesn't get maintained as open land. Some of the visuals in this particular area are so attractive because the land is open. If it doesn't get mowed on a regular basis, it can become, it goes back to forest, which is a different visual. It may be ecologically, or I don't know. And the other question I have is I'm starting to hear about solar projects that involve grazing animals in the solar projects. And I wondered if you had any experience with anything like that.
Yeah. So I guess your first question, Sarah. So we would supply to the town an operations and maintenance plan that's required for us to show what we're going to do to maintain the facility. Now, just to be clear, the operations and maintenance plan is really the mowing that we do at the facility, the trimming of the trees, we just make sure that the area is there. Now, with respect to these parcels of land, obviously, I mean, it's kind of up to the farmer if they want to keep farming it. Like, we wouldn't be the ones saying, oh, no, you can't farm anymore. But if that farmer chooses not to farm anymore, we can't really be responsible for that. I mean, we'd love for people to keep farming it, but if they decide not to anymore, we would try and figure out something, but it's going to be hard for us we're not going to start farming it because we're obviously in the solar business, right? So I would just kind of want to specify that. And then when it comes to grazing, yep, it's definitely something that's more and more common. We've seen it happen, and that's something that we could definitely discuss when we're in the planning process.
The other thing is our land conservancies do maintain programs where they try to connect people with farmable land with people who want to farm it. So I would hope that you would want to work with those people as well if it was farmable land that could continue in farming.
Definitely, sir. Actually, so we actually reached out to the conservancy, I think the Land Conservancy, Becky, but anyways, we called them a couple of weeks ago, the ones that actually were looking at this area, and we told them that we might be interested in this property, and they're also very interested in it. So we're happy to work with them to figure out if we can put these sections into the conservancy, then why not? Like, again, that's something that we could definitely consider. Yeah. So yeah, I guess that was just pretty much the process. And then, I just added a couple of slides here in terms of how does community solar work. So the residents subscribe directly to the solar facility. There is a future which is being discussed in the industry and with policymakers where potentially you won't need to directly subscribe, and you'll just get your Central Hudson bill, and it'll be 100% renewables at that point. So it doesn't really impact. But as of today, residents or subscribers would call the system, and whoever's the operator, which we work with closely, and they would subscribe and say, hey, I would like to have community solar because I'm not able to have solar on my roof because it's a very, very old roof, and I can't install solar panels on it. Or you have other folks that might live in an area where they can't really put a ground mount. So there's all of these, sometimes you can't, if you want to be a solar subscriber, you can't actually do it sometimes on your own property. So you would call these community solar projects and say, hey, I'd like to subscribe. Or you also want to get an electricity rate reduction. So you would call the solar system. And then we would distribute through the grid and deliver it to the customers. And then they would get a bill from the solar facility, and then they would get a bill from Central Hudson. And on Central Hudson, they would see a credit for their electricity that has been paid to the community solar facility. So that's how community solar works today in New York. And then I also added here all of the facilities that are close by in the Central Hudson area. So this is everything that's currently in operations, which I think is within like a 30 to 1 hour drive from the town of Pine Plains. So if you want to go and have a look at what these facilities look like, all of the addresses are here, and all of these are in operations. So these are all of the operators of solar facilities. We work primarily with these folks, Nexamp, and I worked at a previous company before, but I was the developer for this one and another project in this town. So have a look if you want to go and check these out. They're good to drive by and kind of get a sense of what that looks like. But these are all of the ones that are close to you guys.
Does the design standards of all these projects require them to have chain link fences of a specific height around the install?
Yes, yeah, and that's actually more because of electric code. So usually you have to have a 7-foot chain link fence, no barbed wire at the top, but that's usually what electric code requires us to abide to.
So I know that would run afoul of our 6-foot fence limit here in Pine Plains, but I know that's a small potato.
Yeah, but we'd have to abide to the electric code. I don't know if it's 7 or 8. I feel like it's always changing between those two, but those, I mean, again, we set the standards per what the electric code requires us to build to. So
yeah. Thank you.
All right.
That's it. That's all I've got for you guys.
If anyone else have any more questions? I will send this. I'll forward this around to everybody. I should have done that. I guess I didn't think of that earlier. But thank you, Emily, very much. I think it was a very thorough presentation. Really gave us a picture of the state of things and the state of what these things, these installations entail, and how it affects the community and how the code will interact with them. So I think it was very helpful.
Great, I'm glad it helped. If you circulate, have a look at this, which is the Solar Guidebook. So this is the state of New York that really issued a ton of resources for helping municipalities write their codes, understanding the real property tax law. So if you follow the link that I have in the presentation here for NYSERDA Solar Guidebook for municipalities, the Solar Guidebook is here. You can download it. It's great bed-night reading. It's about 200 pages if you don't want to go through that. But it really has the most comprehensive, let me show you. And again, it's, oh, sorry. I just want to do this. Sorry. And here, great. So you can download this book. Like I said, 220 pages, so it might be a little bit of a doozy, but you really have here sort of a lot of general questions that we get at the public hearings, or things that municipalities really want to know, right? Which is there visual impacts? What's the glare? Are there, is there water runoff? Are the panels toxic? It really provides the most comprehensive sort of overview of what these projects entail. And it comes from the state of New York, as opposed to a developer that's obviously got a little bit of skin in the game here. So this is probably the most comprehensive sort of unbiased opinion of what these projects do entail. So feel free to have a look at this guidebook. I always usually direct, what is our local benefits, the tax law, how do we write these pilots and host community agreements, and how do we determine the taxes? Is solar a good use for farmland? Again, it really has a very comprehensive overview. So like I said, if you want some extra bed night reading, go for it. It's got a lot of great information in it.
I have a question, which is from your analysis of the potential for these solar arrays of this size in Pine Plains. The actual potential is very, very limited from what you seem to say.
Yeah.
Are there different considerations for the other larger program that you made reference to, but is not what we're speaking of here?
Yeah, so I guess, first of all, I just want to caveat what I said, in the sense that the electrical infrastructure obviously changes, right? So there might be some
Right.
3 to 4 years, right, where there's a new line, and that is definitely something that you should consider when you're thinking about your code. But as of today, for us, from a feasible perspective, this is the only batch. So that's just one thing that I want to make sure is clear, and I don't want to misguide anybody here.
Yeah, right. And the infrastructure definitely could be upgraded by the electrical companies if they decide to do that, which would then change the possibilities.
Correct. The only thing I would say is that this does take a lot of time, and based on the programs that we have in New York right now, the real opportunity, I think, for Pine Plains to have a system, especially with the fact that there is available capacity and there is a good piece of land where we could do a system, I think is great. So we should all take advantage of this, because there is still the possibility to do something today. It may expand in the future, but as of today, that's that. Now, in terms of your other question with respect to the large-scale renewable energy program, which is not permitted directly through the AHJs and goes straight to the state board.
Right.
For those, what usually happens is that the developers will try and aggregate multiple pieces of land, because it's hard to find 700 acres of one piece of land to do these giant systems. and you need to find the right large scale transmission interconnection, right, that is available. I don't believe there is much of that in town, in currently in the town of Pine Plains. I know our site that we've looked at has transmission cables that go through here, right? But there's just not sufficient land to aggregate to be able to interconnect right now. So when we looked at this, we said, well, the best possibility here for something here in the town of Pine Plains, based on the current infrastructure that we have here, is a community solar project. And that's that. That could also evolve, right? But as of now, yeah, that's pretty much it.
Great.
That help? Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. And also, it appears that this is an amazingly positive particular piece of land in terms of the location and the siting.
I mean, in my 6 years of doing projects, and I've done probably about 30 to 35 of this, I could not agree with you more.
This one looks good.
Yeah, this
Yeah.
is one
Yeah.
where I was like, wow, we can really take advantage of the topography and the characteristics of this parcel and protect this entire slope from any kind of visual impact. And yeah, so
Yeah.
it's from a developer's perspective, this is a really good piece of land where we're like, oh wow, we can really do something that's hidden away, good infrastructure, right? So now we're just working with obviously you folks to get a sense of how the code could work, but this is where we're at now. Yeah,
That's great.
Right, and obviously that's going to be a process. The town board's got to work on it.
sure.
So, you know, it's not going to happen. You know, it's going to take some months to get through that and drafting and
I
public
understand.
hearing and voting on it. So, you know, just be aware.
I understand that, and you know, I think we're in a position. Obviously, we started the interconnection process, so we are waiting for Central Hudson to give us back results, and at some point, probably in the summer, we're going to have to start paying deposits and stuff. So we'll obviously be tracking how you guys are going with your code. But you know, we're very eager, and there's a great opportunity now to do a project, I think, which works for the town, the landowners, the interconnection, structured property taxes around this. So that's pretty much it. So I just wanted to get to preview and understand also where you guys were at in terms of the process. But yeah, we're pretty excited about the potential opportunity of doing something.
Well, it's possibly actually a real motivator to get us to complete this solar law that we've been looking at for a number of years now. So thanks.
Great pleasure. But if I can bring any more motivation, let me know. I'm happy to do that. So,
Emily, the only real complaints I've heard about large solar arrays are their reflection.
Yeah.
There was one in Poughkeepsie in which it really just about wiped out a development because they had to install new drapery in every house that was there. When they did the school solar array, they told us it was non-reflective
mhm.
panels. And just, could you speak to that quickly?
Do you know if they did a glare study on the other projects?
It was in the town of Poughkeepsie, and I don't know what they did. I just
Okay.
heard that it was
So
after the fact.
So Don, I would recommend that when you do write the town code, you do require developers to do a glare study and submit that for analysis and review, because we would take a couple of viewpoints of where the system would be installed and do a glare analysis so that you would have that comfort. And so it depends also on the kind of modules that you're using. You could do an anti-reflective coat on them, which would prevent a lot of the glare to happen. So you can definitely mitigate against that. But the number one mitigation is obviously proper siting. So if the systems are you know, surrounded by trees, it will be hard for the glare to go. And again, if you know a little bit this parcel, it's really at the top of the hill. So any glare would actually not go downwards, right?
Yes.
The residents. So I would say make sure you request a glare study when you're doing a project. Analyze the topography of the land, and have a look at what kind of modules they're using, what kind of anti-reflective coating they're using, and things like that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Anyone else?
Great.
All right, Emily. Well, thank you very much.
My pleasure. If you have more questions, you got my email. Obviously, we're eager, but you know, so we're here for anything that that you guys have questions on, and yeah.
Great. All right. Thanks very much.
Have a great evening, everybody. Thanks.
You
for your
too.
time.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye.
All right. So I think that was very helpful. And that'll be yeah, there you go. And the town board, I guess it's ball in your court kind of thing, I guess. So I guess we can I don't know if you want to have I guess talk to Brian about having I don't know, like some sort of workshop session where we can transmit, you know, to the whole board and talk about these things. I don't know, whatever the next step would be. Talk about the previous recommendations and synthesizing this information that we gleaned tonight.
I think that's a good idea, is we could dedicate one of our workshop meetings to a discussion on how we should get this going again. What information we have now and what we would hope to get. So I would definitely recommend to Brian that we, you know, schedule that as soon as possible.
Sounds good. And I'll reach out to him too, you know, as the committee person. All right. So we're gonna just go on to a couple of items as far for the committee. You guys are obviously welcome to stay, town board members. But just want to talk about the standing review committee and how we're going to proceed. Now we have only 4 of us, right? What is there? 7 total? Yeah. So we're missing some people, but you know, I figure we'll work on our issues that we accumulate throughout the year and try to come up with, I guess, recommendations by like the end of the summer, probably, to go to the board, and then they can work on it the last few months of the year kind of thing. I don't know if board members have anything to say about that, or I don't know how else, you know, this would go about. You know,
Michael, I have to leave, and I thank you for inviting us. I really appreciated the information
sure thing,
that we got. So I'm going to leave, and good evening to everyone.
thanks for coming, Don. Take care.
Take care.
You know, we'll meet once a month. You know, this hopefully this Thursday, you know, the early Thursday in the month works for everyone going forward, hopefully. Although now that I'm thinking about it, I think the first Thursday of next month, I don't think I can make, but we'll might have to adjust that one. But we'll meet once a month. Now, as far as issues, you know, I'm going to encourage everyone to come forward with any issues that, you know, come up or anything they've thought of. Obviously, you know, you can download the code from the website or look at eCode, the town eCode on the eCode site. As far as I know, maybe Sarah, you might know this. I have not seen a synthesized code with the changes from last year yet. Or Drew, does someone know what the status of that is?
No, I wanted to bring that up tonight. I mean, all they've done on eCode has they've presented the local law with the changes, but it's never been integrated together into the document. It's making it really confusing to work with.
Yeah, that's got to get taken care of. I don't know who would do that, but I guess I'll talk to Brian. I think mention it after the planning board meeting last month, but we got to, if it's causing active problems, Drew, for you, we definitely got to get that fixed.
Well, I mean, I think it's for anyone, because if they're reading the document,
Right.
the zoning law itself, they may not be reading what's actual now if they don't go and check the local law.
I agree. Does anyone know how that was done in the past? The past changes to the code? No, we don't know.
Well, I think because now that we have eCode, it's different.
Okay.
When it was an old printed code, someone physically went and changed the printed version, And
Right.
then that was the new version of the code. And
Right.
now that we have the E code, I don't know who does it.
Well, I think that Warren might know about that.
Okay. I would like to see it happen
Done. And of course,
sooner.
we're about to have the second piece of the rezoning occur in the next month or so. So it probably all needs to be done together.
That would be fine.
All right, I'll if I talk to Warren, I'll mention that too. So like I said, anyone who has ideas or things that either community member that they've thought of or community members have brought up, or as we go through the process, with Drew dealing with the community or these applications that come before Drew and then planning board or zoning board, I have a short list here. We got the solar law, of course, then pre-existing uses, which came up with the old Crumpets. I can never remember the new name. I'm sorry, but the old Crumpets restaurant, where you had a restaurant that was there for years, but because it wasn't used for a year, it all of a sudden became like it's a brand new application. And on the mind of the planning board, I think I could speak for them, because at the time everyone expressed how crazy this was. That there's got to be a way that that's not the case. That's something that's been for years and years, and just because what it was is that it was never looked at through the zoning process since zoning was instituted in 2009. So any property like that, and one that's sitting right out there now, is the Stissing House, which is still not open, and it's over a year now. So I don't,
Just very quickly, it seems like it could be simple, but it's in such a specific zone, both those two properties. But we might want to change the way we think about the commercial district at the center of the hamlet, and have different sorts of rules that hew very differently from what we want in the suburban neighborhoods. But it seems like going forward, there's so many things that we would want to be different in the hamlet center that is historic compared to what we might want in the Durst development or in other new development, even in suburban parts of the hamlet near Stissing Lake or something, for example. But I think maybe you could do that with the zoning, Michael, just in that zone.
Well, I agree. And again, we're talking only about permitted uses here. We're not talking about non-conforming uses. It just becomes a non-conforming use because it wasn't looked at through zoning. So you have a restaurant that's permitted in that zone, with perfectly fine, but because it was not looked at after zoning, the zoning was instituted, it becomes a non-conforming use. And I guess I remember Steve Patterson from the planning board, he found some language from PACE where they talked about non-complying, and there's like some different language in there, like differentiating between non-conforming uses and non-complying uses, and that and could maybe have a streamlined process, like you were saying, Roy. And this comes up also where you have I noticed in the code, like retail in the business hamlet, it has to go through like a site plan. It's like, what? Like, someone should be able to just open up like a storefront, without having to go through a site plan process, unless they're making some sort of external changes to the building in the hamlets, in the business district. I mean, so like that, and that's what you're talking about there. Like definitely in the business district, you should be able to open a business without having to go through this, couple of month-long process of and cost expense, in my mind, at least.
I think when the zoning came out, the intent was to get properties to revert back to residential use in residential neighborhoods where you might have a commercial business in a neighborhood. I think that's how it was explained to me previously, and I could sort of understand that impulse in the rural districts or in other neighborhoods where you have an old mechanic shop, it's grandfathered in or something. I don't know, but certainly not in the hamlet center.
Right, and that's covered by the non-conforming uses. Like that's a non-conforming use. It's been in a resident. It's in a residential area. It's gonna only be that, and if they discontinue that use for a year, then it reverts back to it can't be there anymore. But here you have a permitted use in the zones where we want these kind of uses, and they have to go through this whole process. It's crazy.
That seems like a fast track change right there. Just that stroke of a pen.
Yeah, that's a good one.
That's a good one.
Um,
I would bring up, if there's a moment too, but maybe the notion of parking in that hamlet center and what the zoning requires of businesses that are coming online, particularly maybe in the light of new parking opportunities that are evolving in the town center. Maybe there'll be more parking. I think of the old BP too, and imagine future town boards might look to acquire that property from the companies that possess it now, maybe have it be parking for the downtown. But where we have a commercial district that is also our sort of historic district, where space is a premium on these super micro lots, I could certainly see the town saying, if you're within X feet of a municipal lot, the needs of the bulk zoning ordinance as it relates to the number of parking spots you have to have, or how you interact with parking, which on your sacred space, which you don't have much of, if that could happen at a municipal lot, just within a 2-minute walk, it seems like that'd be great. Why put the burden on the property owner, or the property, you should say, not even the owner, but that historic property or whatever, have to manage parking as well.
and we do that. Like, we do count the street spaces and the parking lot. We definitely have to keep an eye on that, because we start counting them, multiple times over. It's a little weird right now. Like Stissing Center's kind of been open, and we have COVID. It's not been. We haven't had a good view of exactly what the parking situation is on a hopping night when all the restaurants are open. The Stissing Center has an event. Stissing House could have some. So it's going to be. We definitely have to. I have no problem, double counting and considering the lots and stuff. And like you said, we don't want to burden people having to put parking lots in, and we don't want like space taken up. But we got to be careful. We don't, it doesn't get too crazy with multiple counting. This spot's been counted 6 times for the 6 different businesses that we okayed.
That makes sense. And that's how it works. It's fluid like that. I don't know if you can think of a time when we've run out of parking in town, really. Maybe there's a few moments where it seemed tight, but I doubt we've ever run out of parking in actuality. So we're doing the right thing, counting them multiple times.
Yeah, and that's, supposedly what we want, according to, when we talked to those planners, when they came and did the downtown, we wanted everything to seem busy and exciting, and, people to want to walk around and visit businesses and shop, etc.
It came up once during the septic meeting, I think, too, but the notion that, and I think of Nasser, I guess, there as well, but he's got to keep his property open. It's this property we'd love to see something on, but he needs it there for both septic and a change of use would require additional parking if you were to want to add physical structure to that downtown lot, and it's not even really used for parking there. I don't know what allowances he has from the town. So his where you want to see more coverage from businesses in the center of town, like at the pharmacy or around the Stissing House or the old Chips, the Guacamole Cafe, anything we can do to maximize the footprint of structures that face on the street, I think is ideal in that district.
Yeah, and fill in, hopefully eventually those lots fill in, create that nice street wall that they talk about. Another thing that we came across was we had a farm market recently come before the board, and they are just a site plan, but for some reason they're in the special use section. It was I don't know why. It was just weird. It just created confusion as, am I supposed to be going for a special use permit or a site plan permit? And they're only supposed to be going for a site plan permit. Well, why? So that might just actually take like a review of going through that and just looking to see, is there any other ones that are like that are just site plan but are in the special use section, and just so we're being clear to the community and owners and stuff. So that's what I have so far as far as issues. One other item that I had on the agenda, I have to, I guess I will have to talk to the town board about this, is, you know, eventually we're going to need a consultant, you know, if we have changes that we're recommending, or maybe the board would just need that. I guess we send just the recommendations, and then you guys would get the consultant to draft the laws or whatever. You know, the last time we worked with the planners, right, who came up with the changes, the text changes, and then Warren drafted the law. So at some point, you're going to need professional people to work on our recommendations.
No doubt. And I think we have just recently reached out to BFJ to have them propose a potential work contracts on this and one other thing. So I think we're on top of that. Great.
Thank you, sir.
Is that for the solar law, Sarah?
I'm not sure. I know there were two things that Warren was going to be in touch with them on to get them to give us a proposal for ongoing work. It may have been the solar law, and that might have been this. Yeah, me too.
All right.
And then there's one idea that I've kicked it around a couple of times and see what other people think about it. You know, we have a couple of hamlets, and I know initially when they were doing the original zoning, those hamlets were considered, and a couple other potential hamlets that weren't made hamlets. And I'm wondering about the idea of a hamlet zone in the Irondale section, where there are quite a few small houses there already, and there's Victoria Crossing. And then one of the reasons that would motivate doing that is that ultimately the land that the town hall, the current town hall sits on, might become available, and you might want it to make more of a hamlet there with smaller potential for smaller lot sizes. It's just an idea. I was curious what people might think about that.
That's a great idea to explore. It's a really interesting idea.
Because that way you keep you already have density there, and it's very nice. It's a very nice density, I think. And you could make it a real sense of a hamlet with a little planning.
Yeah, it sounds like an interesting idea. I'll have to go drive up there and visualize it.
I did have a resident of our downtown who lives on a corner lot reach out. Maybe he reached out to Drew as well, but asking after what informs the rules that says he has to have 2 front yards on a corner lot, which he felt like, I think, was denying him the backyard, side yard space he wanted. But I think that was something that we had talked about in the last session too. I don't know if Drew, you remember that coming up previously.
Yeah, that comes up now and again. I mean, it can become difficult for someone, but it's a real tough thing. I mean, if you're on a corner lot, you physically have 2 front yards. I mean, what I've always done is wherever they enter from, opposite of that area becomes the rear yard, and then the other one becomes opposite the other front yard is the side yard. That's usually been my rule of thumb to determine.
So you will let them have they do have 2 front yards, or they have 2 side yards?
No, they have 2 front yards,
yeah.
But the question becomes on which opposite
is
the back and the side. So
yeah.
my rule of thumb has been whichever front yard you enter from, the opposite line becomes the rear yard, and then the remaining one becomes the side yard.
Yeah.
But so what I guess Rory's saying is that they get restricted for what they can do in that other front/side yard, I guess, is what.
Well, they get restricted also on where you determine where the backyard is.
Right.
Like that usually becomes the issue, which we've helped with because the backyard now the setback has been reduced, so that becomes a little bit less of an issue. That 40 feet was, you know, a pretty bone of contention with a lot of people. That was a big chunk of land.
That is a big chunk for the downtown. I mean, what did we come down to? It's only 20. 20 still seems
25.
like a lot.
Yeah.
It's still a lot to me in the downtown, I think, but we could go lower there if we felt comfortable. Those lots are so small.
All right. Well, I want to just thank everyone for volunteering for the committee and taking the time, etc., as usual. Appreciate it. I think the community hopefully appreciates it. All right. So with that, if no one else has anything, we will look to meet again in a month, and everyone dig into the code and check things out and talk to people and see, if there's anything else we want to tackle.
Sounds good.
And download the NYSERDA
Yes.
solar info.
Yeah.
If you really want to put yourself to sleep at night.
Oh, and Tricia, can you send that presentation around to everyone, please? Thank you.
Sure.
So that as a tier 3 project would use up more of the maximum space that they have than we would allow, or that we talked about permitting provisionally anyway.
I don't know. It looked like it was pretty in line. I don't know. I'll have to go look. I'm going to run the numbers on that property. I got to look it up, how big exactly that property is. Oh, also, by the way, did you notice the nomenclature clash where we talk about tier 1?
Yes.
Yeah, it's like the reverse. Their tier, our tier 3 is their tier 1. I was like, whoops. I guess we didn't.
Never too late. Just flip your fingers.
Yeah.
Like I was looking it up as she was talking. That's 108 acres, that parcel.
108. And did she say how big that was? Was that 20 acres or something?
Yeah, I think she did say 20 to 22 acres.
Yeah.
And what did we have in the recommendations? Does anyone remember? Was something?
I thought it was like 10, 15% or something of total lot.
Was it that restrictive? Wow.
Well, we were looking to be somewhat restrictive, I think, but this project reads as so friendly in so many ways because of all of the
108
acres. Whose property
Rory,
is that?
I think she was misunderstanding, what you were talking about too. If they're going to be the property owners,
Yeah,
they're going to be
dealing
dealing
with
with farmers.
Yeah.
They're going to be dealing with the farmers who are going to come and continue to farm the land. It's not like, I don't know, they're just going to do what they want to do. No, you're going to have to deal with them. And that's what you were asking. Are you going to allow that, I think, right?
Yeah. Sounds like they are, I guess, too, but it's also, they're not going to put any effort into making sure it happens. Probably.
Yeah, if they eventually have an application, it's going to be a weird, I don't even know what mechanism we could ensure that they make sure they keep, getting farmers to farm the land, or just at least actively put it out there, right? Why if they own it, why couldn't they just be like, hey, we're not going to farm it? They have who knows? Say devil's advocate, they have a bad experience with someone doing something or dumping stuff, or and then they're like, no, we don't want this anymore.
Right, because it does take some maintenance too to maintain farmland that Sarah talks about, sort of, not just the functionality, but also.
Well, you could require that they, at a minimal, at least mow the fields once a year.
Yeah.
Right.
Have some requirement of that. If it wasn't being farmed, it should be at least mowed once a year.
They would lose their ag assessment, maybe theoretically, if we were being very vigilant about auditing usage over time.
Well, I think we want to encourage them to keep the ag exemption by farming, by having somebody farm it.
Right. Well, right. But if she didn't seem to be aware, she's like, well, if there wasn't a farmer there, whatever. But
I know.
She might want the ag exemption, so she might want a farmer there. Yeah.
Right. But the way she was talking about the tax law, they're going to fall into this payment in lieu of taxes. They may not even care about a farm exemption.
Right. That's so interesting. And does that mean that the town really gets to decide the dispensation of monies that would have otherwise gone to the school district and the county?
I don't know.
Who gets chunks of that if you're not getting the property tax? And that means there's zero property tax. They just some other arrangement. Is that because that's because the total value of this solar install and all the panels is so high that should you put an assessment on it because it's so expensive that it would be taxed too much? Do you think?
I think so.
And the state facilitates that? They require that?
Sure. Yeah, I think because they're trying to encourage this to happen.
Fascinating. So that property comes off the tax roll, but there is a pilot payment system that could.
That's the way I understand it.
Very interesting.
Didn't she say that some of it they split it up and give some of it to the school, or no?
Yeah. Yes,
she suggested that the town could decide to do that, and that the county sometimes just lets the municipalities keep all the money. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah.
Really?
Informal.
I know.
There's a lot we don't know. There's a lot we don't know.
Yes.
Yeah, we'll have to run that down and talk to Warren about how that would work. But obviously, we need to think of that, when you guys are drafting the code. It's got to be in there, like where, how that's handled, the payment in lieu of taxes or whatever.
Yeah, like that and the complete property maintenance.
Yes. And decommissioning. There's a lot of stuff there. It's not, yeah. And all the studies that we would have to require. I guess you could handle that with some sort of catch-all, like any studies that required by the.
What stops them from coming back and slapping a lot more panels on the more visible portions of the property in the future? That would be whatever provisions of this tier 3 so-called.
Well, they would have to get to that size where they couldn't. So it seems like, I guess there's some input from the local communities that the state hears that the community's like, no, we don't want this. Supposedly they're going to, but I thought that's what was happening up in Anchorage or something, right?
I don't think the community has much say when those bids come in. I think they've streamlined it big time. And there's really, the secret process is basically evaded.
Crazy.
Not really required in any kind of rigorous way. Pretty well.
Rich, you're muted if you're talking to us.
You're muted still.
You're still muted. Okay, here you go.
Sign language. I was talking to somebody else.
Okay.
Ah.
Oh, sorry.
All right. All right, everyone. Well, thanks again. And
See you
Thank you,
guys.
Michael.
take care. Have a good night.
Have a good night.
Stay dry.